Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for coming tonight. Uh, we're going to talk tonight about some practice habits. Now, when I was a young student, I felt like I didn't really know how to practice. Like my teacher would always say, "Here, take this thing, go practice it, work it up to this tempo, go work on it, bring it back next week." So just go work on it, just like go, try to do things. And I feel like I didn't get very productive things. I wasn't very efficient about my practice. And as I went along, I sort of wished that I knew like how to practice more effectively, how to practice more efficiently. So I sort of compiled my thoughts and I boiled them down. I've got a little slideshow for you here. So we're gonna get going with that. Productive practice habits. So why do we practice? Practice to get better at instruments, to learn music, stay in shape, practice because it's fun, right? We all started playing music because we really enjoy it. It's something that we like doing. So practicing shouldn't always be boring. Practicing your instrument should satisfy your heart and your mind, right? So of course we have to do the technical practice things, the stuff that may seem a little more monotonous, a little more boring. But if we get our technique really good, then we can do our musical expression without anything in the way, right? So you're always going to have maybe assignments or a piece of music you're playing in your large ensembles that you're not too crazy about, but you got to jump through those hoops. And when you're practicing, make sure it's not just those tedious things. Make sure you do things that really satisfy your soul, so that you enjoy what you're doing. Okay, so when you're doing a practice session, what should you be covering? And the elements of a pretty good practice session just sort of tick these boxes. You warm up, you practice some technique, you practice some repertoire, and you play something that's fun. When you're learning how to do a skill on your instrument, there's sort of stages of learning here. And this is how I interpret them in my mind, and I think it makes sense, at least to me. So we learn by doing. If you're, say, gonna learn how to play the tuba or play the guitar or shoot a basketball into the hoop, the first time you do the thing, you probably won't do all that well at doing it, right? And that's completely okay. You're coming at a complete novice. Maybe you have beginner's luck and you do it right away, but then you still have to practice that motion. You got to get used to it. You have to dial it in. And once you dial in that motion, so you get the ball in the basket or you play the note that you want to play, then you have to refine that quality. And once you refine that quality, like, yeah, this is the best version that I could possibly do, then we're going to reinforce that best version. And this applies to pretty much anything that we're going to play. It applies to any technique that you might cover, and it applies to repertoire that you might be working on. Say you're just working on playing a B flat whole note with a really great tone. You practice the motion. Okay, I got to make my face like this. Got to blow. Got to get the note. No, okay, let's form our face differently. Okay, now I got the note. Now let's get that quality. Let's sort of zhuzh out the tone, and we're going to talk about tone later on. You get the quality you want. Awesome. Now let's practice getting that quality, because now you've got a bunch of different versions in your head of how to do that thing, right? Our memories don't really discern between good music or bad music. Our memories just remember what we've done. So that's why it's important to find the best quality and then reinforce that quality. It's like you're gonna etch something in the mud, or like there's graffiti on the wall. You write a word on the wall and like, oops, I meant to write a different word. So now you've written one on the wall, but that was supposed to be a two. And then you got to write two strongly enough, so strong that when you look at that wall, you see two. Even though the one is still there, you know it's supposed to be two, and you're going to get two registering every time. So when you're practicing and you've got your long-term goals, it's important to get organized. So think about, what are your goals? What's your vision for your future? What do you want to be when you grow up? Essentially, right? Do I want to be a superstar player in a major orchestra? Do I want to be a band director? Do I want to be an astronaut? Anything that is on your vision board. What's your vision? And then what are the steps that you have to take to achieve that vision? And that usually involves a series of smaller goals. So if you structure around a school year, we all have our own goals for the semester. In each semester, maybe you have to play a jury, maybe you have to play a recital, maybe there's an audition coming up. So we structure our weekly and our daily goals around that. Our weekly goals, okay, I've got some repertoire to learn. I'm gonna try to learn the first movement of this piece this week. On the daily goals, what techniques am I learning? Which part of that first movement am I going to achieve today? And even from the daily ones, you can do it minute to minute, hour by hour, however you're organized. And just having this sort of structure, having this path out in front of you, you can have a clearer vision of what you need to do. I need to get my scales up to 120. I need to get my range up to 3 octaves. And you just get to those goals step by step. So in the spirit of getting organized, it's important to schedule your practice sessions. I've had way too many, especially younger students, ask them, "Oh, how'd your week go? What did you work on? What did you practice?" And I get the response, "Oh, I didn't practice as much as I would have liked to," which usually means I didn't practice at all or I practiced very little. Now, this can come down to the motivation of the student, or it can come down to I had 6 tests to prepare for this week and a concert and a football game and all these other things that I literally had no time. And that's okay if you've got a lot of priorities. But if you've got consistently a busy schedule and you want to practice, it's really good to schedule your practice sessions. Like put it in your calendar as a class, as an appointment. If you have a routine, like a daily routine, a weekly routine, whatever, then it's very easy to stick to that. Now, in terms of when in the day do we get our best practice done, I find, and a lot of people find, that the best practice happens first thing in the morning. Now, if you're going to school and you have class, there's obstacles to that. Say it's a Saturday. You've got Saturday to practice. You probably should get that practice out of the way first thing in the morning, then it's done, and the rest of the day is yours. You can do whatever you want. You've already spent all of the focus and energy that you needed to get all your stuff done. So, of course, different people work differently, right? How you schedule your time, how you structure your week. So instead of trying to fit yourself into somebody else's box of what like works best, know yourself. Like, be introspective about it. Do I practice well in the evening? Then schedule yourself for evening practice time. And a really important thing is to track your progress. And that goes hand in hand with this overarching theme that I have is the best way to practice is to do so consistently. If you practice a little bit every day, then you will get better. Whether or not you're practicing efficiently or effectively, if you do a thing time after time, day after day, you will get better at that thing. And it's easier to feel better about your progress if you've tracked it. I know in my Arbin book, I've got tempo markings written out. Okay, it's at 80, it's at 90, it's at 100, it's at 120, it's at 160. Right? I can see over time, yeah, I've gotten faster, I've gotten better. I have concrete proof that I have improved. So when you do have your practice sessions, if you want to get the most out of them, you should practice with intention. You should have a plan. What is your goal for that practice session? So, okay, I'm gonna sit down, I'm gonna practice for 30 minutes. I'm working on my scales. I haven't learned all of the scales around the circle of fifths just yet. I'm going to work on my G flat major scale because that one I always seem to trip up on. Okay. I'm going to spend 10 minutes on my G flat major scale. Okay. What's the note in that scale that really gets me? The C flat. I haven't seen many of those. So I'm going to really make sure I get the C flats. Okay. I'm going to use my pencil. I'm going to write that in. Okay. I've got my C flats. It's going great. Let's try it for 2 octaves. Okay, I've gotten into my second octave, and at the top of the second octave, now it seems like I'm straining. It's really hard to get that top note. The tone quality's kind of changed. Okay, so now I'm going to spend a few minutes working on just those higher notes. I'm going to pull out my mouthpiece. I'm going to buzz those notes, see if I can do it with less effort, and so on and so forth. The idea is that psychologically, when we're working on something, we can only really truly focus on one thing at a time, right? And this works for your own practice. It works for teaching others. If you focus on just one element, say I'm working on rhythm, I'm going to work on this rhythm. I don't care if I miss notes. I don't care if those notes sound bad. If I get the rhythm, that's a success. Then upon that rhythm, I can add, all right, now I'm going to press the right buttons and get the right notes. All right, okay, I've got the right rhythm, I've got the right notes. Now let's work on that tone quality. Maybe I'm going to slow it down and play one note at a time for a whole note and get the tone quality. And then I'm going to put that back into the context and test myself. So again, one thing at a time, just incremental improvement over time. Oh yeah, so this, I'm looking at my own slide here. So focus on one element at a time, turn that element into an exercise. And this really comes into play when you're working on repertoire. Say you've got like a lip slur or something that's difficult. You're playing along, you've got this lip slur and you're happening slowly, it's not centering. So, okay, I'm going to take that lip slur and turn it into an exercise. In the piece, it goes do, 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 do. Maybe it's that, okay? So do, do. Let me isolate that lip slur. Do, do, right? Turn it into an exercise. I just did it a bunch of times, that one little element. Put it back into context. Do, 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 do. Perfect. Great. Now I can move on. All righty. Practicing technique, one step at a time. Devote that time to a single technique, and you can sort of break down your techniques into categories, right? You can work on articulation, you can work on range, you can work on tone, you can work on slurring, style, any number of things. Use that practice log, right on your music. Keep track of your progress. And again, from the stages of learning, you can start with something unrefined and improve it gradually. A good example of that is, say, like doing lip trills in the upper register. No one is good at those on brass instruments right away. You got to start with something really unrefined because you have to get over that partial break to trill these notes. And it's going to sound bad and raucous at first, but then you can take that thing that now exists and boil it down to something beautiful. And when we're learning a new skill, if we're not good at it right away, we need to be okay with having something unrefined, an uncut gem, perhaps, and letting it be not so great for a few days or a few weeks or even a year. Like for me, when I was working on my range as a student, like I couldn't reach a double B flat, like a B flat an octave above the staff, but I got there incrementally. Small victories. Okay. So I've covered a few elements of technique. They're including, but not limited to the ones that I've included here. The warm-up. Warm-up is a technique. And the warm-up is something very personal. I've witnessed a lot of people warming up in a lot of different ways on different kinds of instruments. I've seen people's packets of like, this is my warm-up kind of deal. And it's got all sorts of different stuff in there. There are a lot of unifying factors. A lot of people play some sort of slur, some sort of scale, some articulations. They cover a range, a couple of octaves, whatever works. Now, in the warm-up, in the true warm-up, that's you mostly warming up your mind. If you're in shape on your instrument, it only takes like a minute, maybe, to get your face going. If you're playing all day, every day, then your face is ready to go on a brass instrument, that is to say. You don't even have to warm up the face. You're warming up your mind. It's in the morning. Okay, let's get focused. Let's get our body moving. One thing that I really like to do on the brass instrument, on my tuba, is buzz some tunes. I'll just buzz whatever comes into mind. And that's just an exercise of getting what's in my head out into the world as a tune. And it helps me think as if I'm singing. Like the tune in my head right now is right? It's movie tunes, whatever. That's a great warm-up. Now, on the instrument, I'm really bad at playing by ear. So I could not play you that tune on my tuba. Now, if you see someone's like technique pack and it's like 20 pages long and say this is a warm up, that's sort of a misnomer. The warm up is to get you going. You don't have to be worried about hitting all the right notes right away, right? You're giving yourself that leeway. You don't have to be hard on yourself yet. Once you're out of the warm up and working on technique, that's when we're really focused, trying to get that best quality right away. Okay. So the issue just in naming, it's more semantics than anything. Like if you have a big old packet covering a lot of things, a big range, it's not really a warm up. It's more of a workout. And you should be when you're working on your basics at your very best playing, because your basics are the foundations of everything else that you're going to produce on your instrument. Yeah, get moving, get focused, buzz, cover techniques, play things that are easy or comfortable. You don't want to strain your high range right away and spend your chops before you even get your day going. And for me, I like to keep it fresh. I play a different warm up every single day. It just whatever appeals to me. If it's scales, if it's arpeggios, low range, high range, I keep it fresh. So tone. Tone is something that I teach and practice a whole lot because as a tubist, tone is most of what I'm responsible for in an ensemble. And as a young student, I went through that period of learning of what is a good sound on my instrument. What is that ideal? So my teacher gave me a bunch of recordings to listen to. I listened to great tubists with beautiful sounds, and I tried to emulate their sound. Now, just because I play the tuba doesn't mean I should only try to emulate tuba players. I listen to vocalists, cellists, pianists for their musicality, for their tones. Our instruments are wind instruments. Their conception was to emulate the human voice, just amplified, louder. And we can get different tone colors, of course, on our brass instruments. But when we're playing something lyrical, if you can get a singing quality on your wind instrument, that's sort of the best kind of quality you can get. And even on a string instrument, like on a guitar, like I was listening to Led Zeppelin the other day, and it's like the solo break, and they're going back and forth between voice and guitar, and the guitar was getting the same intonations as the voice. It's like pretty awesome. So when you do get that conception of what a really good sound is, and you're going to work on sound, one thing at a time, play a whole note, play that B flat, play that F, and devote your entire focus to the sound of that note. Now, there are exercises that you can do with working on the tone. Two very simple ones where you just want to like change one variable at a time. Simple exercise is manipulate the position of your jaw, and this is on a brass instrument, right? So it's like a exaggerated chewing motion, and you're just basically trying to find the sweet spot in there. Hold that sweet spot, take a breath, do it. And then, especially with younger students that don't quite have a conception of what to do with the inside of the mouth, I have them manipulate the tongue position, going from I to sort of experiment and see how that changes the sound. And the idea here is to experiment on your instrument, figure out how to make sounds that aren't beautiful, figure out how to make sounds that are beautiful. And in that way, you'll have more tools in your toolbox to manipulate what you're doing and get the sound that you really want. Now, say you've established a really great tone on an F. Try to spread that tone around. So you've got your F, you're playing a beautiful F, and then you take it down to an E natural, just a half step. Transfer that tone down. E sounding pretty great. Let's start on an E, transfer it down to an E flat, just half steps, baby step kind of thing. Doing that, okay, cool. I've got maybe the span of an octave. This octave is sounding fantastic. Now I'm going to go playing something smooth and connected, just sort of spreading around that tone in a lyrical style. Then try articulating. That kind of thing. Now, a very important tool is to record and listen back. When we are producing tone, either with our voices or with an instrument, the sound that we perceive in our ears is different than the sound that people that are not us hear. So if you put a microphone, you can use your phone, that's good enough, put it on the stand, put it across the room, And it'll be helpful to listen back with good headphones or good speakers, because the iPhone speaker is kind of terrible at producing the sounds of tuba. Uh, you know, so if you got headphones, you play what you think is a great sound, and then you listen back. Is that actually a great sound? Make adjustments, try again. So in that way, you can teach yourself. You can be the listener and the player at the same time. It just takes the time to record and listen back, and only do like very, very small chunks. That's really the best way to do it. So you're working on intonation. We have to grasp the concept that our ears are better at intonation than our eyes are. The tuner is a very powerful tool. It's a very useful tool to tell us, are you playing in tune with the tuner? Now, the tuner, although it's powerful, is a flawed object. It can tell us that A440 is exactly in tune. And every other note is not exactly in tune, because if you use the equal temperament, all the notes are equally good and equally bad, which is a good way to organize things and conceptualize and play well with others. But if you really want to play, say, a harmony, like a major triad, the air vibrating in the space doesn't really care about our equal tempered tuners. It cares about the physics of vibrations, about overtones and harmonics. So that's why when we're tuning our major triad, we have to lower the third and raise the fifth to make those vibrations agree and line up. So that's why it's a good idea to play along with a drone. You can have a drone, say, drone a B flat, listening to that drone strongly and playing a B flat scale on top of that, or even playing a chromatic scale on top of that, and trying to tune against that. If you've ever played like a really in tune, like perfect fifth, it gets this that like buzzy resonance when it just locks in. It's very satisfying. I've got my piano over here. It's got that satisfying quality to it. Even the perfect fourth has that same thing. Right. And nice thing about the digital piano is that it doesn't go out of tune, and I don't have to pay somebody periodically to fix it. But yeah, you can use the piano as a pitch reference. That's a very valuable tool. Anyway, playing along with the drone frees up our ears, our focus, to focus on one sense at a time. And when we're playing, we're not going to have a tuner on our stand anyway. So it's closer to practicing and performing to use our ears. And with the whole equal temperament versus just intonation, if you're resonating properly with that drone, it won't necessarily be in tune with the tuner. All right, working on range. My perspective is from a brass instrument. If you're working on range on the piano, you just reach a little further to the right and you go higher, or a little further to the left, you go lower. But on our brass instruments, it takes time to build up endurance and dexterity to go a little higher or go a little lower. Now, there's sort of a diminishing returns aspect to working on range. As a beginner, you pick up the instrument. Okay, I play one note. Great, I've got one note. Now let's play a third. Great, I've got a third. I've got a fifth. I've got an octave. Right? Within the first week of playing, you could probably play an octave, and that's awesome. That's tremendous advancement. Now skip forward a decade or so. You're playing along. Okay, I've got 3 octaves, and I want to push that to 4, and it's going to take me a couple of weeks to add another half step, because it takes that time to build up that strength, build up that endurance to get there. Now, luckily, as we get older and more experienced, we get a little more patient, hopefully. So we can devote that time, devote that energy, that consistency to just get that little more, get that little more. You know, you're climbing that mountain, and it's just, it's a inverse exponential curve, I suppose you could describe it as. So when you're building your endurance to work on your range, you should do so from the middle out. Most of the playing that you should do on your wind instrument, on your brass instrument, should be in the middle of the range. That's the core of your technique. Have that be very strong. And when you're playing in the middle range, you shouldn't really be getting tired that quickly. You could go for like an hour at a time and still have plenty of pace. So that when you push up to the higher ranges, you're already very strong and coming at it from a point of great stability. Right, you have the base of your pyramid is very strong, and just do that little by little, and save the high range practice for the end of your session. If you're really going to push it, try to go like up higher and higher and higher. Save that for the end. Now, again, with those high notes, if you can play those high notes softly, that probably means that you're doing so with a good technique. With the embouchure of the brass instrument, like there's sort of the pucker embouchure and the smile embouchure. With the smile embouchure, we stretch to get that smaller surface area of vibration. Well, it's also very hard to control, and it takes a whole lot more energy to get going vibrating. So it's really hard to play a high note quietly with the smile embouchure, which also requires jamming the mouthpiece into your face to try to isolate those small muscles that need to vibrate at a short length to produce a higher pitch. If you're using proper technique with the more of the pucker embouchure, where we're making it shorter by pushing in and creating a smaller aperture here, then we can play with more efficiency and do quiet, beautiful notes going up instead of strained notes going up. Importantly, when we're stretching the high range, more on this, if you reach the point of fatigue, it's a good idea to stop. If you're trying to push your boundaries while you are fatigued, then you're going to develop bad habits to try and get that little extra. And you also risk damaging yourself doing that. So patience is key. Going to the low range, I think it's a little easier, at least on tuba. It's more about building up the lung capacity and the efficiency to get that big, slow vibration. And much like the high range, step by step, go down by half steps. It's the way to do it. Scales are a very important technique. Scales are what music is built off of, unless it's a 21st century sort of different kind of music. But most of the music that we see, most of what we play is based off of a key, signature, and a scale. I work with a lot of younger students, a lot of high schoolers, some middle schoolers who have never played a sharp note. In their band program, they've never had to play a sharp note, even like for their band placement auditions. In Illinois, we've got the ILMEA, Illinois Music Educators Association scale sheet, which takes you through all your major and minor scales through the circle of fifths very efficiently. However, for regular band placement auditions, you only have to play the flat side. And even on the junior version of these scales, they only take you through the flat ones. They've got C major, which has a B natural, which is an honorary sharp note, especially if you're playing a trombone without a trigger on it. Seventh position, that's the danger zone. What I'm getting at here is that you need to learn all of the notes, all of the letters in the musical alphabet. You have to become fluent in the language so that when you see those notes, you know what to do instead of, I don't know. What is a C flat? I don't know. A sharp, never seen that before. So go through your whole circle of fifths. Take the time to do so. Last year, I went on a whole roll of having my students just take a piece of paper, draw a circle, write out the circle of fifths with the key signatures, and just play the scales without even looking at music, so that they have to conceptualize in their head what those notes are. And that is directly to the point. Bring your worst scales up to the level of your best scales. B flat major is every band kid's favorite key. When I went through this exercise with all those students, we got to B flat and they're like, yeah, I got this, dude. Perfect. Amazing. I've played this a bunch of times. But the first time you play a B flat major scale, you don't know what B flat major is. It's going to be slow and unfamiliar. So all it takes is that time and repetition and consistency to get your F sharp major scale as good as your B flat major scale. Learning the language. So once you've learned what buttons to press, what the notes sound like, then you can use a metronome to test yourself. Can you play all 12 of your major scales in 2 octaves in under 2 minutes? That's a pretty high bar. But if you practice enough, you can do it. Maybe set, okay, 5 minutes, I'm going to do it. Or I'm going to set my metronome at 60 today and test myself that way, right? Little benchmarks, track your progress. The metronome is a great concrete tool to show you if you're playing better over time. And again, or not again, anyway, you should practice a variety of scale patterns. So do, that seems to be the standard one that everyone uses. But then you put something different. It's the same notes, but in a different rhythm in front of the student. And then they will go on autopilot. and play it with the rhythm that they learned before. So do 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 do. Same scale, but it seems a little more difficult because it's in a different rhythm, right? Or do 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 do. I got a scale in thirds, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, that kind of thing right there. All right. So dynamics, that's another thing that we all need to practice, right? We got to push your boundaries of loud and soft. A very good tool is a decibel meter. Decibel meter measures loudness in the unit of decibels. Let me see if this will show up. So I've got one, there we go, on my phone. Make myself a little bigger. This is SPL meter. I think it was like $2 on the App Store. Yeah, look at that. So it even has, I can dial in. Right, it's a good concrete way of seeing how loud are you playing. Ooh, and trying to get that needle to move smoothly. It's great, just concrete feedback. Am I playing louder? Am I playing softer? I used this with a bunch of middle schoolers the other day with the contest of who can play the loudest, and they had so much fun. It was great. And it got them to actually produce a lot of sound. So anybody can play loudly. Can you play loud with a good tone? That takes more skill. It also takes a lot more skill to play softly. If you see piano, think P for power. On our brass instruments, the small airstream is more liable to become interrupted. So we have to work harder to maintain that airstream. We have to be small yet intense, sort of shouting a whisper to keep that thing going, especially if you're going up and down intervals. One technique that absolutely everybody needs to practice is pacing out a diminuendo. And this is because it is much easier to apply pressure gradually than it is to release pressure gradually. Have you ever done one of those like mirroring exercises with a partner, like pressing against each other's hands? If you're trying to like back off of this, it's way harder to gauge than to apply pressure gradually. It's the same thing with diminuendos. Everybody diminuendos too fast. I'll see like a forte piano. So another tool I use for this, you can use the decibel meter. Absolutely, trying to get that needle to move smoothly is a great challenge. But I go to the tonal energy analysis page, and I've got the desktop version of this. Maybe I can demonstrate. But you try to get this thing. You try to create a perfect cone. I didn't do too hot there with my whistling. I can do better on the tuba. But if you can create just like a perfect triangle of sound, that's another immediate concrete visual feedback. Am I doing this diminuendo or opposite crescendo? Am I doing it well? Am I pacing out correctly? The app name. So the one I just showed you there, that is tonal energy. Yep. And then the other one was SPL meter. Yeah, the tonal energy, that's like the best $4 I've ever spent. Honestly, that thing does everything. I can talk about that a little more with the practice tools segment. Yeah. Okay, articulation. Again, my perspective is from brass instruments. It's best to think as if you were speaking, because we have all been practicing speaking since we were little babies. I know this. I have a 10-month-old daughter. She's over in the other room. She is learning how to speak. She's starting with ma, 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 da, 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 ba, 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 all these different syllables. Point is, use what you've been practicing your whole life. If you say with your voice, two, 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 say that with your voice, try it out. Two, 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 two. Now you're going to blow air. You're going to say two with wind. And have your tongue strike in exactly the same spot, because that's where you've learned to enunciate the word two. Two, two, two. Where you go, ta, 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 da, da, da. Any consonant followed by a vowel. It's usually the letter T or the letter D in there, followed by a or oo, ah, and there's all these gradients in there, right? If you relate to speech, you can produce a complex result from a simple thought. Right? Two noodles, Do 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 do. Marcato. Ta 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 ta. In that way, I wasn't thinking about how to use my body differently. I was thinking about the product I wanted to produce in the form of speech, which I've been doing for a long time. I know how to speak. So that comes down to the syllables. Can you reproduce identical articulations at will? You have to get control over what we're doing, like do 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 do. Pardon me. You're trying to make all of those absolutely uniform so that when the case comes that you do want to do something differently, do 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 do, you do it at will on purpose. How many styles of articulation can you produce? We can think of a lot. We can rattle them off. Well, we've got legato, marcato, staccato, bel tone, portamento, all of the gradients in between. You've got marcato at piano, marcato at forte. You can change one variable at a time. You have to just sort of increase your palette that you can choose from to produce all these things. So start with something broadly defined and develop your gradients. So working up speed and endurance gradually over time, that comes again, like working on Arbin. I have these tempo markings going up from like 80 to 160. Working on single tonguing, it takes a lot of coordination. If you weren't a musician or working on articulating like that, you probably couldn't do that with coordination or with great enunciation. It takes time to build that up. You have to go. You got to work up to it. And if it takes you a week, takes you a month, that's fine. You've still worked up to that point. You've tracked your progress and you've seen where you've come from. And then the last idea here is that velocity forces efficiency. If you're not working with efficiency, you're going to hit a wall. You're not going to be able to go any faster, right? One big tip for being efficient with articulation, especially repeated articulation, is to blow once and articulate several times. So the wind and the tongue and the vibration and what you're doing with your hands are all independent elements, which means that you can change one without changing the other. So all of those articulations exist on the same airstream. So if I'm blowing once, the air is always there. All I'm doing is touching that airstream with my tongue to get that little interruption. The classic example is turn on the faucet and flick your finger through the stream of water. The technique of slurring. Slurring differs whether you're doing it loudly or softly. If it's a big slur, is it a little slur? Are you going half steps or are you going an octave kind of thing? So I break it down into sort of two types of slur on the brass mouthpiece. So a glissando slur or a direct slur. Both get you to the same destination and both have their appropriate time to use them. So the glissando slur would be like, I get all those gradients in between. And if I'm playing a scale, pressing buttons, that's going to translate into a smooth scale. But if I'm just trying to do two notes, that's more of a direct slur. I'm skipping all of that stuff in the middle to go from one to the other. Nice thing is you can imitate this with your voice. Same kind of technique, same kind of thought. So I can put that in the tuba for you just so you can sort of see the result. If I'm going to slur, say, from a C up to a C, let me click this button. That one was a direct slur. Now, if I do the glissando slur, you're going to hear the resistance of the partial break. And I even caught the G on the way up. Right, so that's the difference between the direct and the glissando. But now, if I'm going to say play a scale, I'm going to buzz that glissando into the tuba. If I pull my mouthpiece out halfway, you can sort of hear what I'm buzzing while you can also hear what's resonating in the tuba. make sense? Right. So that comes from the idea that partial breaks are bumpy. We're navigating these partial breaks. We're trying to go over the bump smoothly, disguise it, or take advantage of it, and do what's more of a natural slur. Now, of course, your face has to move the same distance to go between notes, regardless of tempo. But going do slowly is different from do. Right, we got to work a little harder, a little more agility to go quickly. And with that agility, it's a good idea to build it up over time. If you have like a scale interval pattern, do, one of those, that's a great opportunity to work on this. Let's move on to the next thing. All right, practicing repertoire. How do we go about learning our pieces of music? When you get a new piece of music, you take a look at this thing. Okay, there's a bunch of notes. Let's get the big picture. What key is it in? What's the meter? Kind of thing. Try to look at the structure of the piece. These days, all the kids are looking for YouTube recordings because they want to listen to it before they play it. YouTube's a great resource, and it's not a bad way to learn. Now, of course, there's a lot of content on YouTube, but there's no like quality control. There could be a professional or somebody's like high school recital. Now, great for the high schooler, but the professional is probably going to be a better example of how that piece of music goes. So how many sections is that piece of music in? Say you're working up an etude, right? If you got like say a page long etude, it's got your intro, maybe second theme, development, recap, and that's the end. So you can break it up into those sections. Okay, within those sections, how many phrases are there? Maybe there are 2 or 4 phrases per section. Okay, let's look at this phrase. That one's got a bunch of 16th notes in it. Let's look at that one. Okay, which 16th notes are tough? Or can I just choose like one beat, one measure, one little small chunk? Let's zoom in, right? We're going big picture to small picture. It's like in the movies, we got space, closer, 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 closer. Now we're looking at a leaf with an ant on it, right? Improve that one little thing and then piece that together with the other little things that you've improved to do the big thing. Now, of course, this is a very, what we're describing here, like zooming on every single note, that'll take a lot of time and a lot of effort. And maybe you don't want to spend all that time and effort. Maybe you don't have the attention span for that. Maybe you just don't have enough hours for that, right? I was working, I pretty much got this technique of really zooming in during my master's with Rex Martin. And initially, yeah, it was a little bit tedious to like really, okay, I need every single note to be centered. But once I did that on like a couple of etudes, it became second nature because I've already practiced that technique. And I've covered a lot of different notes between those couple of pieces. So that, okay, yeah, I can play every single one of these right in the center, nice and clear, and it's coming out well. And you can do this kind of practice like just on your major scales. In your major scales, every single note in tune? Is every single note having the same articulation? Are they all centered and beautiful? Right? Do that with your A flat major scale, then go play something in the key of A flat and see how well you do. Probably pretty well. Yeah. So again, we turn that one little element of technique into an exercise. We practice that, and we go and do the thing. We're zooming in. So another big element of practicing repertoire is making musical decisions. Music is more than notes and rhythms, surprisingly, I know. So your pencil is perhaps your most important tool. So once you've learned all your notes and rhythms, and maybe even before that, you have an idea of how this music goes. What mood, what emotion, what story is this music portraying? What can I do to enhance the ink on the page to bring out that story, bring out that emotion in the music? Make decisions. Okay, in this arc of the phrase, which note is the most important? What am I going to emphasize? Use your pencil, make those marks. The reason why we use a pencil is, oh, I don't really like that. I'm going to choose a different note, erase, choose something different, right? So if you're really getting into the weeds of practicing a piece of music, it's probably a good idea to write notes to yourself. And the phrase is, the faintest mark lasts longer than the strongest memory. So use your pencil, make musical decisions, do something crazy outside of the box and see how it works. Oh, and very importantly, on a wind instrument, where are you going to breathe? On the tuba, a lot of times it is, I simply don't have enough gas to make it through this phrase. So I have to breathe. Now I have to choose a spot that's not very obstructive, that's not going to interrupt the flow of my phrase to breathe. Now, there is one rule that I want you all to adhere to, and that is you can breathe wherever you like as long as you don't disrupt the flow of your phrase. If you can musically justify the place where you breathe, you can use rubato, maybe extend the note before the breath slightly before going on. Justify it that way. Or if you're just quick enough, do, 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 you can sneak in breaths wherever you like. But in an ideal world, you would only take breaths that match up with the arc of the phrases, whether it be a technical passage or a lyrical passage. You take breaths that would match up how you might speak or how you might sing the music. Think like a vocalist, but have better rhythm, please. All right, so tools for your practice sessions. Your pencil. Always have your pencil. Last school year, I bought a pack of sparkly pencils, like a 32 pack, and I gave away every single one of them. They were the super special extra sparkle pencils, okay? And I give them to the student. This is your super special extra sparkle pencil. I will have this with me at all times and bring it to every single lesson, right? Because you got to mark stuff in for yourself, for your teacher, for your ensemble, for your rehearsals. It's a critical piece of kit. Metronome, we talked about that a little bit. Here's a little trick that you can use with the metronome. If you are working on not just having good rhythm, but having good time, use an offbeat metronome. Offbeat metronome. So I have a fancy metronome. This is an offbeat metronome. Ready? These are offbeats. Now they're downbeats. Do 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 do. In that way, the metronome is no longer the leader. You're the leader, and the metronome is the follower. If you're the leader, if you're in charge, this is just reinforcement that you're doing it right, right? But then you're more responsible, and then you go do 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 do. You really develop your sense of time. You can keep it on the offbeats, or you can go on downbeats and just have progressively longer gaps in between when it goes. One of my favorite studio class experiences was when we all buzzed "Pop Goes the Weasel" with a metronome that would click fewer and fewer times every time we did it. So, yeah, okay. So we had it at 60, and then you could put it on like 12/4 or something like that, okay? And then every time you repeat the song, you take away half of the beats. And then you take away half the beats, and after a while, it's just one click every time you play it. Do 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 do, or do 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 da do da 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 da. That really tests if you're keeping your time, right? So let's see here. We can even type this in. Let's go 12/4. I'll show you here. Do 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 do. Oh, here. You know what? I'm gonna do this. Share, metronome, meter, 12/4, 60. All right. Let's see here. Can you hear that? It's coming through? Okay. Let's start it. Do 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 and so on and so forth until you've taken away all but the first click. And if you line up with that, then you're very proud of yourself that you'll have excellent time. And you do it on the mouthpiece, buzzing, and that's also extra practice that way. Okay, just got a couple more things to show you here before we wrap up for the evening. Tools, okay. Tuner, we did that a little bit, talked about that. The pitch reference, I love using the piano. If it's in the room, that's fantastic. Otherwise, you can use the pitch generator from the Tonal Energy app. That is another very useful tool in there. If you're learning a piece of music that's a little, it's got bigger leaps, you're not quite comfortable with them, you don't really know how it goes, like do, do, see if you can reproduce it that way and then take it onto your instrument. Recording. When you're going to record to practice, record small snippets. Do like 2 bars at a time. Record, listen back. Identify the thing that needs improvement. Practice that thing. Record, listen back. Identify, practice, record, listen back, so on and so forth. If you're recording like a whole movement of a piece, that's too much. You're going to listen back and hear too many things that you want to fix, and then it's just going to be overwhelming. Okay, I'm done practicing. Never mind. Right? So the small, easily digestible chunks. And that way you don't feel like you're taking forever to listen before you go back to playing, right? Just like 10 seconds at the most, honestly. Small chunks. Listening, right? Listening back. Also listening to other people playing the music. Learn how the piece goes. Listen for alternative interpretation styles. Listening to people for tone quality, for musical interpretation. Listening just because you like music. Right? If you want to get better at playing jazz, listen to jazz. Then you better know how it goes. If you want to get better at playing Mahler, listen to some Mahler. And then you sort of get the mood of what's going on there. And of course, the practice log, that helps you get organized. That helps you track your progress and feel good that, oh yeah, I was playing this at 60 beats a minute a couple weeks ago, and now I'm up to 120. This is great. All right. Okay, so structuring practice sessions. I've just got a couple examples of how you might structure a session. So you get through all the things that you need, right? 30 minutes, you can take 5 to warm up, 10 minutes for one technique, 10 minutes to target your repertoire, and then 5 minutes for something fun. If you were to set a timer on your phone for each of these segments, that 30 minutes is just going to fly on by. Here's an example of a 60-minute session, right? A little longer to warm up. You get to do 2 techniques. Rest a little bit, because during this first 30 minutes, you're going to basically be playing continuously. You want to have like all your music ready to go. Okay, I'm going to do this, 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 and this during my session. Just have it ready to go. Play, 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 rest. When you're resting, try to rest your mind as well as your body. You can stare off into space. Try not to go on social media. That'll suck you in, and then your second 30 minutes is gone, and oh, now I'm out of time, right? Come back, do your repertoire, really get lost in it, and then do something fun. Reward yourself. Buzz, pop goes the weasel. And then this is an example of a 2-hour session. Right, you get a little longer to warm up, go into your technique, take a break. More technique, take a break. Repertoire, more repertoire, take a break. More repertoire, something fun. So this is more like if you're working up a recital or something, or if you've got like a big performance coming up and a lot to do to fit it all in. Now, these are all great if you want to do, if you like working on things in small segments. And if you set your timer here, that allows you to escape perfectionism, which is kind of important here. We can drive ourselves crazy trying to make something perfect, right? But if you give yourself 10 minutes and you make an incremental improvement, then that is a win. That's a victory. And you build upon those small victories. So one last slide for you, and it's a very simple one. You must practice performing. So we do all this stuff in the practice room. We practice all these techniques. We use our pencil. We mark up our music. We practice all our repertoire because we're going to perform. So we spend way more time in the practice room. We spend way more time rehearsing than we do performing. And performing is its own technique. It's its own thing to get comfortable with. So the more you perform, the more comfortable you will become. Right? I've seen people busking, like musicians busking. They're not world-class musicians, but they play all the time. They're very comfortable with playing in public, just like with their case opening, waiting for somebody to drop in $1. And they're not too concerned if they're playing perfectly. They just keep on going, right? And that's sort of a contrast to, say, the symphony musician, who also performs all the time, but is at like the height of their game, best in the world kind of thing. And that's a higher stress scenario. They have to play perfectly because people have paid to come and see them play. Now, we all sort of lie somewhere in the middle of that. The point is, get more performance opportunities, practice performing. And a good way to do that is take a video of yourself, simulate the performance scenario, play for your friends, play for your parents, right? But as soon as you see that little record button, that puts on the stress, puts on the pressure, right? And if you simulate that pressure, then you get more comfortable when the actual pressure scenario comes up. That is all I have for you. You can, if you think of something or have a question or want advice on something, you can always email me, mbriggs@vandercook.edu.